Hello. Welcome back to yet another session on the Merit Shine channel. And this is Ravi in front of you once again. And this is going to be another heart-to-heart conversation with regards to how do you look at preparing an area which has caused a lot of grief to the students over the last couple of years, which is looking at your general awareness, banking awareness, financial awareness, economic awareness, and all of them put together, right? Now, when I say general awareness, iska generally matlab kya hai? Ki this is an awareness that you should generally have, right? So that is the thought process, right? ये हमें basic information है जो पता होनी चाहिए. That is the expectation, especially from the context of the recruiters जो ये exam conduct कर रहे हैं कि कौन सी ऐसी awareness है जो हमको basically पता होनी चाहिए, right? That is what they're trying to test, right? They're trying to test you on aptitude. They're trying to test you on the fact that are you aware generally about what are the things that are happening around you, right? That is the main thought process which I want you to go throughout the session, because that's how you'll be able to understand what is the need at this point in time, right? Now, when I look at this entire scheme of things, let's try and first of all understand the trends कि इस साल क्या हुआ, right? And when it comes to the last year, again, the trends were pretty similar, and I've also put a link in the description of this video which tells you how the paper was last year as well. So you can watch that video also to gauge as to how things have been over the last couple of years. And predominantly मैं कह सकता हूँ कि वो trend जो है continue हुआ है पिछले साल से भी, right? But if I look at the two main trends this year, so essentially there was one SBI PO, of course, and then there was your IBPS PO as well. When you look at SBI PO, it was slightly on the easier side, right? And obviously if you had done 3 months of GA fairly well, you would have kind of got a lot of questions covered from that perspective. But when you look at the IBPS exam, even though it was predominantly weighted towards the month of December, it was still not an easy exam at all. It would be considered from moderate to tough because some of the questions that came out were not that straightforward. उसमें थोड़ा detail में पढ़ने की ज़रूरत थी, इतना आसानी से आप वो attempt नहीं कर सकते थे. It was on the moderate to difficult side, right? And of course, understand one thing very clearly, right? And this is true for any subject. This is true for GA, BA, FA, whatever. कि अगर exam easy है, तो ये मत समझो कि आपने crack मार दिया. भाई आपने crack मारा है, सबने crack मारा है. Understand that aspect very clearly in your mind. If the exam is easy, it is easy for everyone, right? Everyone is going to score. And at the end of the day, this is a relative examination, right? So if you score well and if the others are also scoring well, what difference does it make? On the other hand, if the exam is tough, right? It is tough for you, it is tough for everyone also, right? So in that context, अगर low scoring रहेगा, तो सबके लिए low scoring रहेगा ना? So understand this, that this is a relative grading that is happening here. You're being tested vis-a-vis the other competitors that are there in the exam, and you're not tested purely on your actual score. तो पहले तो ये बात क्लियर में रखो दिमाग में कि चाहे इजी हो या डिफिकल्ट हो, वो सबके लिए ही है, सिर्फ आपके लिए नहीं है, right? That is the first thing that we need to understand very clearly in this aspect, right? Now, one thing which I want to very clearly talk about is इस सेंस में how do I prepare for this exam? So there are different preparation styles that you can adopt based on the kind of person that you are. But before we get into preparation styles and the kind of personality that you are, it's important to understand what exactly have been the deeper trends in the last couple of years. And of course, this is from our experience of interacting with our students and also as GA faculty. So one of the basic things that emerge is that, are there any direct questions still? Yeah. Obviously, there are definitely direct questions, but their proportion in the exam has definitely come down significantly as what it was a couple of years back. 2-3 साल पहले it used to be predominantly one-liners only, but अभी जो है trend काफी change हो गया. Direct questions आ रहे हैं, but उनका proportion काफी कम हो गया. You have more statement-based questions appearing now. And the important aspect here is that the devil is actually in the details, right? Which means कोई एक न्यूज़ का सिर्फ हेडलाइन काफ़ी नहीं है, उसको इन डेप्थ में एनालाइज करना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, उसको समझना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, and that's how you'll be able to do well in this exam because they're not testing you only on knowing the news item. So there have always been questions on indices and rankings in the last couple of years. So for example, area rankings was definitely asked. There have been questions on indices as well. Then you talk about another important aspect, which is knowing full forms of a lot of things, right? So for example, this year one of the questions was about the full form of CCPS. So अगर कोई आप नया टर्मिनोलॉजी या फिर कोई चीज़ सीखते हो तो उसका फुल फॉर्म पता होना भी ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. Then the other angle is that it's not predominantly been on the first news item or the headline itself. There have been questions that have been asked from the subtext and the paragraphs itself. For example, अभी latest एक James Webb telescope आया था, तो they didn't ask you about who developed this telescope and all, but they talked about the range of that telescope and basically what's the difference between the distance between the Earth and the orbit of that telescope. So these kind of questions have been asked, which obviously were not the headline item. They were more detailed information aspects, right? Then another thing is that there have been a lot of questions around numbers as well, right? So a lot of questions pertaining to, let's say, GDP numbers, or let's say some other scheme related allocations as well. So those kind of numbers have been there. Either number has been asked, and let's say, for example, you talk about the semiconductor industry. So what was the allocation? So the number was given, but the industry was asked. Sometimes you have the industry, or let's say the basic information given, and the number is asked, right? So a lot of those questions are emerging from the numbers perspective as well. And there have been several questions that have emerged from a jargon standpoint as well. कोई नई चीज या कोई नई term आई, जैसे for example you talk about tokenization, क्या होता है, right? So a lot of such things can definitely emerge, right? So you talk about small value payments related questions आए थे recently. So the thing is that कुछ भी नया jargon emerge हो रहा है तो उससे related definite questions could also be possible, right? So the thing is, the trend has definitely changed, right? And of course the important thing also to realize is that static as such नहीं पूछा जा रहा है, right? अगर कोई स्टैटिक क्वेश्चन आ भी रहा है, फॉर एग्जांपल इस बार के पेपर में देयर वाज अ क्वेश्चन ऑन डैन ब्राउन, राइट, एंड देयर वाज अ टॉक ऑन द बुक दैट ही हैड रिटन, डा विंची कोड. देयर वाज अ टॉक क्वेश्चन ऑन बीबी का मकबरा एज वेल. बट अगेन हम ये सोचते हैं कि वो स्टैटिक क्वेश्चन है, बट नॉट नेसेसरली स्टैटिक. वो वाला जो स्टैटिक न्यूज जो है, इट वुड हैव काइंड ऑफ कवर्ड इन सम काइंड ऑफ अ करंट अफेयर्स न्यूज कहीं ना कहीं, राइट? एंड दैट इज वेयर वो स्टैटिक के फॉर्म में इमर्ज हो रहा है. हमको लग रहा है कि बीबी का मकबरा इज अ स्टैटिक क्वेश्चन, राइट? या डाविंची कोड जो डैन ब्राउन ने लिखा है वो स्टैटिक क्वेश्चन है, बट टेक्निकली इट्स नॉट स्टैटिक बिकॉज डैन ब्राउन वॉज इन द न्यूज इन द मंथ ऑफ डिसंबर. बीबी का मकबरा वॉज इन द न्यूज इन द लास्ट 6 months, and automatically that is actually static news, but static general knowledge, but that is related to something that has happened in the current state of things, right? So it is always current that is appearing as disguised form in static. So these are the predominant trends that have emerged, right, as far as the exam is concerned in the last couple of years. Now the important thing to understand here is that इस पूरे process में, right, जो भी हम प्रिपरेशन करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, there is a method to the madness, right? So obviously लगता है क्या पूछ रहे हैं, कहीं से कुछ भी आ जाता है, they're just asking anything that is coming to their mind. Yes, it is unpredictable, right? It is difficult, right? क्या आएगा क्या नहीं आएगा, it is difficult to predict that, right? But there is still a method that you can follow which can yield you reasonably good results, right? So idea is very simple. I'm going to talk about 3 preparation styles that can help you do well in these exams. And which preparation style you adopt depends on what kind of a person you are and what works best for you, right? So it's important to understand that this is a game that you need to play, right? But if you're playing this game and if you adopt any one of these preparation styles, it's also equally important to understand that till the time you enjoy this process, right, you will not be able to succeed. So the first thing is you pick up one preparation style, right? You trust the process, right? Whatever you're going to be following, you have to believe that this is going to work for you. And next, you got to enjoy that process fully, because unless you enjoy it, trust me, you will not get the results that you want. And then the most important thing is, after you have decided a process, you've basically chosen to trust a particular preparation style, you've also made sure that you're enjoying the process, it's important to stick to it till the end, right? That is going to be the crucial aspect, क्योंकि end तक उस पे बने रहना है. That is what is going to yield you the results. Now let's quickly try and understand what are the different preparation styles that we are basically talking about, right? So the first thing that you're looking at is the quicks. The second one that I'm talking about is your regulars, and the third one is basically your marathoners, right? So these are the 3 predominant categories of people who basically prepare for the GABA FA segment, right? Now I'm going to talk about each one of these in detail, and what I want you to do is to think whether you belong to that category or not, right? And obviously if you belong to that particular category, then I will expect you to follow whatever I'm telling you for that particular category, right? So there is nothing wrong in being in any of these categories. All these categories have their pluses and minuses, so it's fine whichever category you belong to. It is you as a person, right? And it's just important that whichever category you are, ensure that you stick to the process in that category. That becomes very, very important, right? So the first style that we're trying to look at now is basically called as the quicks. So as the name suggests, these are individuals, they want a quick solution, right? A fast solution towards cracking GA. So इसमें thought process क्या है कि these are individuals who are preparing for GA, BA, FA, whatever you call it, from the perspective that GA is not their strength, right? And they don't also want GA to be their strength because they are trying to hone their skills in reasoning, English, quant, and a lot of other allied subjects, right? But technically they feel यार GA में अगर cut off clear हो जाए तो भी काफी है. And I'm not really hoping to really master GA. Whatever best outcome that I can get out of GA, that's fantastic, with the least amount of time that I need to spend on it. So this is the category which is basically called as your quicks. So basically thought process बहुत ही clear है इन लोग का कि इनको GA में जितना बेस्ट पॉसिबल रिजल्ट अचीव कर सकते हैं वो अचीव करना इन द लीस्ट पॉसिबल टाइम. दे डोंट वांट टू डिवोट टू मच टाइम टू जीए बिकॉज दे फील दैट दे हैव दो स्किल्स इन अदर सब्जेक्ट्स एज वेल, और एटलीस्ट दे आर ट्राइंग टू बिल्ड दो स्किल्स इन द अदर सब्जेक्ट्स. सो दीज आर बेसिकली द क्विक्स एज आई कॉल देम. नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज, इस कैटेगरी के लिए what is the best preparation strategy, right? So obviously these are not the ones who would want to do a daily kind of a routine, right? So they would prefer to basically start a few weeks before the examination. Now how many weeks, that entirely depends on how much time you have and how much preparation you have done for the other subjects as well. So basically you can look at anywhere between a fortnight to a month or a month and a half depending on where you fit in. So in this context, it's very simple that when you're looking at the last few weeks before the examination, you will essentially be focusing on the monthly PDFs that basically come out, and let's say the monthly quizzes that are going to come out from the various sources that are available. Now the question is, how do I go about the preparation in this scheme of things if I'm basically belonging to the quicks category? So I'm basically looking at the monthly PDFs and the monthly quizzes only. The way I look at it is that I have to go in the reverse chronological order because obviously I have limited time available with me, right? So for example, I talk about the exam being in the month of January. So the way I would target this is because I'm starting in the last few weeks before the exam, I would obviously try and look at, let's say for example, the month of December first, then go back 1 month to November and then October, right? And then come to January and try to complete as much of January as I can. And then depending on how much time I have available, I may look to revise these 3 months, or if I've been able to revise also, then I go 1 month back and go to September and so on. And it all depends on how much time is left with me. And I'll basically look at targeting those months and keep going in the reverse chronological order. उल्टा चलेंगे. तो जनवरी में एग्जाम था, तो दिसंबर, नवंबर, अक्टूबर, then you come to January because एंड ऑफ जनवरी के लिए थोड़ा टाइम बचेगा, एंड देन उसके बाद अगर फिर से आपके पास टाइम बचता है तो यू कम बैक एंड यू कम टू सितंबर, प्रोवाइडेड दैट यू हैव ऑलरेडी रिवाइज्ड अक्टूबर, नवंबर, दिसंबर प्रॉपर्ली. सो दैट इज द ओवरऑल स्ट्रेटजी दैट यू विल लुक एट, ऑब्वियसली ट्राइंग टू मैक्सिमाइज व्हाटएवर बेस्ट यू कैन गेट आउट ऑफ जीए, right, in the limited amount of time that is left with you, right? Now this is the strategy, and of course kitna time aap GA pe doge, that also boils down to how well you've prepared for the other subjects and how many hours per day can you take it out, right? And entirely boils down up to you. So it will be like itna hours hai mere paas and isme what best GA preparation can I do, right? This is the strategy. Now the question that comes is strategy के pros क्या हैं, इस strategy के cons क्या हैं? इस स्ट्रेटेजी के प्लसेस क्या है? द बिगेस्ट प्लस ऑफ कोर्स इज दैट यू कैन ऑब्वियसली कंटिन्यू डेडिकेटिंग दैट टाइम फॉर द अदर सब्जेक्ट्स, की प्रिपेयरिंग दो सब्जेक्ट्स ऑल्सो, राइट? अगर पेपर इजी आ जाता है देन दिस स्ट्रेटेजी वर्क्स बेस्ट बिकॉज यू विल एंड अप स्कोरिंग वेल एंड द वंस हु रियली प्रिपेयर्ड वेल दे विल ऑल्सो एंड अप स्कोरिंग वेल. सो इसमें कुछ डिफरेंशिएशन नहीं आ पाएगा, राइट? सो इफ द पेपर इज इजी इट वर्क्स ब्रिलियंटली फॉर यू, बट इफ द पेपर टर्न्स आउट टू बी टफ, right, and it becomes a little bit more challenging than what you had expected, then obviously this strategy will not work effectively for you. Another con in this preparation is that because you're giving very limited time to GA, the retention levels will be lower, right? So retention जो आप retain कर पा रहे हो वो कम होगा. वो क्यों होगा? Because आपकी understanding level भी कम है. आप लास्ट मिनट में पढ़ने की कोशिश करो तो आपका understanding level भी definitely कम होगा. So your understanding is lesser, because of which your retention is lesser, and because your retention being lesser, the chances of remembering things is going to be lesser, and that might lead to a lower score in the exam. That is the thought process, right? But this is a good strategy if you're looking to primarily clear the cutoff and be at least somewhere just above what is required in GA, then this strategy works best, right? Now coming to what are the sources that are available here, right? So obviously I'm not going to recommend specific sources, but I'm going to tell you how to choose those sources, right? So सबसे पहले जो इस सेगमेंट में बिलोंग करते हैं, द प्राइमरी थिंग दैट यू विल बी लुकिंग एट इज द मंथली पीडीएफ्स एंड द monthly quizzes that are available, right? So there are multiple sources available in the market. So what you should try and do is pick out some of those free PDFs that are available from those sources and try to see कि उन PDFs का जो डिलीवरी स्टाइल है, जो प्रेजेंटेशन स्टाइल है, और जिस टाइप के वो क्वेश्चंस देते हैं क्विजेज में, वो आपको सूट करता है कि नहीं. बिकॉज इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट दैट सी व्हेनेवर आई एम ट्राइंग टू रीड ऑल्सो माई स्टाइल में डिफर फ्रॉम समवन एल्स. सो इफ आई पिक अप अ पर्टिकुलर PDF, the kind of presentation style they have, right? So they're using bullets, they're using let's say bold fonts, different colors, right? And they're also giving you a lot of quizzes available, right? And the kind of questions that come in those quizzes, right? Are those one-liners? Are those statement-based questions? So all these things will help me decide whether that particular PDF suits me or not, right? The important point is कि for me as an individual, if I pick up a PDF, that PDF, once I read it, it should give me the best possible return of my time, रोटी मैं हमेशा बात करता हूं रिटर्न ऑन टाइम इन्वेस्टेड. सो जो मैं टाइम इन्वेस्ट कर रहा हूं इस पीडीएफ को पढ़ने के लिए, क्या वो पीडीएफ उस काउंट पे डिलीवर कर रहा है कि नहीं, राइट? सो इज इट डिलीवरिंग मी द बेस्ट रोटी? दैट इज द थॉट प्रोसेस, राइट? सो एंड दैट डिपेंड्स ऑन द डिलीवरी स्टाइल ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर source and also the kind of quizzes that they are giving, right? So that is the primary thing that I will judge them on. So you have multiple free sources that are available. You can refer them, and let's say if that works out for you, then you can go for that paid, offerings that they have, right? That is the context as far as your quicks are concerned. So I hope this overall scheme of things is clear. What are the pros and cons of being in the quicks category? How do you choose the sources? And what kind of sources am I looking at? And of course, the overall preparation strategy. I hope this is very clear. Right, so now that we've understood quicks, let's move on to the next category, which is basically called as your regulars. Now, as the name suggests, these are guys who are regular. Regular not just in GA, but also regular with the other subjects. Now, in terms of priority, GA in log ke liye important hai. Right, but GA is not as important as some of the other subjects, right? They'll be happy with a reasonably above average score in GA, right? That is their thought process. And GA may not be predominantly their strength, but they're happy to spend some amount of time on it, right? This is the category of students that I'm specifically referring to. So इसमें basically आपका objective क्या है कि they are the individuals who are willing to give some amount of time to GA, but all the other subjects are higher priority as compared to GA, but they have some interest in GA as well, right? So basically दिन में 30 to 60 minutes is something that they are willing to take, right? And here the strategy will be very simple. You look at a morning and a night kind of an approach, wherein you spend some amount of time looking at the daily news items in the morning, right? And you also follow the daily quiz in the morning itself. You take that in the morning, and then at night, just before going off to sleep, you again revise those daily news items, and you basically again take another quiz in the night. So basically सुबह शाम में आपका revision होता है. Then they will end up spending 1 additional hour on a weekly basis that will basically revise all the news items of that particular week. That is a thought process with a weekly revision, and then follow it up with a monthly revision as well, right? So here the objective is very simple, that as the exam draws closer, right, so technically the revisions will be faster, right? The retention will be higher because you have already been spending that time on a daily basis. So revisions jaldi bhi honge, retention better hoga. So obviously if the exam turns out to be easy, you're expected to perform very well. And even if the exam turns out to be tough, you'll definitely be performing much better than let's say the cutoff, or let's say the average score that has been there. So you'll end up being on the above average side of things. You have not compromised on your other subjects. उस पे आप उतना ही टाइम दे रहे हो जितना आप देना चाहते थे. बस GA पे आपने इतना फोकस दे दिया है कि आप above average maintain कर पाओगे अपने आप को उस लेवल पे, right? That is the most important aspect here. So you'll obviously be better prepared to handle even if the exam turns out to be tough, because आपका understanding better है, आपका retention भी better होगा, right? That is the whole idea. Now इसमें भी the way it differs in terms of identifying the sources is that इसमें भी वही style इस्तेमाल करना है sources को identify करने के लिए. Obviously there are multiple sources that are there. So you look at the presentation style, right? And if you look at the quiz style, the kind of questions that they're asking in their quizzes, so that becomes very, very important to choose the perfect PDF source, right? Now the question here is, how does it differ from the quicks wala strategy of selecting the source? Quicks में हमने mainly focus किया था presentation style and quiz style from a monthly basis, monthly PDF के perspective पे. But यहाँ पे we will be using all the PDFs. So we'll be looking at the daily PDFs also. We'll be looking at the daily quizzes also. We'll be looking at the weekly PDFs and the weekly quizzes, and then eventually the monthly PDFs and monthly quizzes at the end, right? So इस strategy में all the PDFs that the source is providing you, those become important. So you basically look at those PDFs and figure out whether this PDF suits me or not. Does it suit my reading style? Does it make sense to basically follow this particular PDF? क्या इनके questions अच्छे हैं? All of those things we get into the groove of, and then we decide basically that this is the PDF that works best for me, right? That is the whole idea. So the difference between regulars and quicks is, in regulars you have to look at not just the monthly PDFs, but you'll also need to look at the weekly and the daily PDFs to gauge whether it fits your style of reading or not, right? That is the way you will decide whether this ideal source is the best for me or not, right? So again, it's a decision that you have to take on your own. Don't go by what others are saying. आप खुद decide करो. You judge it based on the material that is in front of you, right? That is how you'll have to do it. And again, there are multiple sources that are available. You can refer them and choose whichever one is the best fit as far as you're concerned, right? That is the strategy as far as your regulars are concerned. Now coming to the next important category. These are guys who are basically looking at it as a marathon, right? So they love general awareness, or even if they do not love general awareness right now, they are very keen on loving general awareness overall, wherein they see general awareness as an important part of their growth journey, right? they are thinking long term, right? So they're looking to build GA as a strength. It may not be a strength right now, but they're definitely looking to build GA as a strength, right? And this general awareness, banking awareness, financial awareness that they are going to be reading is not just from the perspective of cracking the exam, right? But it is also from the perspective of cracking the interviews, and it goes beyond that as well. They are thinking of making GA a part of their life, right? Regular reading a part of their life, right? Because they realize that the more they read, the more they spend time on understanding new things that are emerging in this sector, and they've decided that obviously they're going to be remaining in the banking sector in their life. So they realize that जितना time उसके बारे में पढ़ने के लिए वो spend करेंगे, उतना ही उनका confidence level ज़्यादा होगा. The confidence levels will be higher, and obviously higher the confidence level, it will definitely hone their personality as well, right? They'll be far more superior in their conversations when they have with others. It will also help or brush off in improving their English elements as well, and they'll also, as a byproduct, be able to crack the exam and the interviews also, right? That is the holistic picture that comes in, because these are marathoners. They're thinking of it from a long-term perspective, and it is not a short-sighted preparation wherein अरे exam clear हो जाए तो हो जाएगा. That is not this category. They are thinking GA is a part of my life. I'm going to make it my strength, and I'm thinking long term, right? Now, in this case, the strategy that you will have is basically looking at, let's say, another additional hour or so per day. So you're looking at 1.5 hours to 2 hours per day as the primary thing that you're looking at. But the problem with this strategy is that जो भी time आप additionally GA के लिए निकालोगे, that time has to come at the expense of the time that you could have spent on some other subject, right? So whatever time you give here, right, it has to come at the expense of, let's say, some of the other subjects, right? But benefit क्या है इस strategy का? You will be the best prepared to handle the exam even if it is tough, right? अगर exam tough हुआ, you will end up cracking the exam where nobody else has kind of cracked the exam. That is one definite possibility that is there. So the primary advantages here are that your scores improve, right? Your confidence level improves, and automatically your personality also improves. So not just allowing you to crack the exam, but also cracking the interview, and also maybe cracking life itself. That's the whole thought process. So here the funda is that you definitely have the highest of all the three models that we've discussed. You have the highest level of retention. Why? Because you have the highest level of understanding as well, right? Because understanding अच्छी है, because आप continuously revise भी कर रहे हो, आपका retention level भी definitely ज़्यादा होगा. And again, the con is that it comes at the expense of some of the other subjects. And एक और इसमें एक glitch है कि because आप इस पे इतना time spend कर रहे हो और आपको इतना पसंद है, you may sometimes get carried away, right? So you may want to know something in more detail, but point ये है कि at that juncture, maybe that is not the right time to spend additional time on it, right? So sometimes or some days it may happen कि आप 1.5-2 घंटे के बजाय 3 घंटे 4 घंटे GA पे लगा रहे हो. So it's very easy to get carried away in this approach, right? So that is where you want to draw the line, 1.5 to 2 hours per day, not looking at beyond that, right? That is very, very important. Now, how do I decide to go about this preparation? Let's look at the next slide for that, right? So इसमें हम approach की अगर बात करें, so the main thing that I'll be looking at is awareness being a long-term game, and what is the kind of strategy, if I'm a marathoner, what's the strategy that I will look to adopt? So it's a very simple CR approach that I tell everyone. First, it's a choice that you have to read, right? And you have to accept that this is a choice that you're making, that you have to read as much as you can, right? Obviously, as I said earlier as well, it's easy to get carried away. So you've got to limit your reading in terms of the number of minutes that you're going to give every day, right? So let's say 1.5 hours to 2 hours, you've decided कि आप 1.5 घंटा दोगे या 2 घंटा दोगे दिन में, उतना ही देना है, उसमें जितना हम पढ़ पाएंगे उतना पढ़ना है. So keep that time pressure on you, because what happens many times is that when that time pressure is there on you, you end up retaining better, and you don't waste unwanted time on things that do not matter, right? So you have seen the trend, you've seen the papers of the past years, you know what kind of questions are being asked, right? So you focus on reading that kind of content only and not everything, right? So इसको अगर time bound manner में आप करोगे, that will give you the best results. You're choosing to read, and you're choosing to read in a time bound manner. The next CR is that you have to build that curiosity to recognize, राइट? नीरज चोपड़ा अगर जैवलिन थ्रो में गोल्ड जीते हैं तो जैवलिन का एंगल क्या था, जैवलिन का वेट कितना होता है, जैवलिन का लेंथ कितना होता है. यू हैव टू हैव दैट क्यूरियोसिटी टू नो मोर, right? So let's say if the news was there about Dan Brown, what do you say, having a settlement going on with his wife on the court, then I think, okay, Dan Brown ने कौन कौन सी novels लिखी थी, कौन कौन सी अच्छी novels थी जो निकल के आई. तो the point is, it's not just about the choice to read, but it's also about the curiosity to recognize, right? If there is a news item, do I have the curiosity to know more about that news item rather than just looking at the headline? So that's the second CR approach. And the third CR approach that I'm looking at is that I need to bring in a commitment to a routine, right? So I get into a daily routine. I decide that this is the time at which I'm going to look at it in the morning. This is the time at which I'm going to look at it at night. I get into a daily routine, and it's a commitment to myself that I will stick to that routine till the time all the exams are over. And more importantly, I'll stick to that routine even after the exams, because I've decided that I'm a marathoner. GA is a part of my life now, right? So I'm going to stick to this routine even after the exam is over. And that is the approach that you will look at. And then the fourth CR, which kind of brings all of these together, is that you have to bring in that consistency for revision. So you choose to read. You bring in the curiosity to recognize the patterns and understand some more about that news rather than just looking at the headline. Then you bring in that commitment to a routine, and also you look at a consistency to revise. So if you look at these 4 CRs, these can definitely help you get brilliant at general awareness, banking awareness, and financial awareness, which will help you not just in cracking the exam, but will also help you in basically honing your personality, improving your confidence levels, overall having better conversations with people, and of course cracking the interview as well, right? Obviously this methodology comes with its own caveats, wherein you have to take this time away from all the other subjects, right? But if you do this, then obviously you become a master in general awareness, banking awareness, and financial awareness. Now, how do I go about doing this specifically is something that you need to understand. So the first thing that I'm looking at is about the static GA. As I've told you already, static is already disguised as current affairs. So you're essentially looking at different kinds of news that emerge from a current affairs standpoint, and you try to look at them, right? Not specifically looking at the static part of it, but looking at current affairs, and wahan se hum wo wala CR use karenge, that is curiosity to recognize, right? That is the context. Next thing that I'm looking at is the economic affairs, financial affairs, and your banking affairs related stuff. So basic things like, for example, what are the latest developments in terms of Basel norms, aapka LCR ka level kitna hai, NSFR ka level kitna hai, talk about your capital markets, your equity markets, debt markets, what are the latest developments, IPO related SEBI ne bhi kya recent regulations nikale hain, foreign trade mein kya kya developments hue. You talk about things around the GDP, right? So there are GDP, GNP, gross value added, a lot of those terms that basically come into the picture, right? So you look at things like what is the level of inflation. So currently we are on a band of plus minus 2% or 4%. Monetary policy stance kya liya hai RBI ne? Is it an accommodative stance? Is it a hawkish stance? Whatever it is there. Then what is happening in the money markets perspective, right? A lot of these things also become very important to understand. Money markets mein kya chal raha hai? Call money, notice money, term money mein. Then you talk about the borrowings in terms of, let's say, the liquidity adjustment facility and the repo, reverse repo window, and अभी RBI ने recently VRRR शुरू किया है, TLTRO शुरू किया है, उन सब चीजों का क्या context है. Then you look at the non-performing assets, what is happening from that perspective. A lot of regulational changes happen from the perspective of your PCA framework recently. So RBI came up with revised guidelines for PCA for banks, but they also came up with revised guidelines on PCA for the NBFCs, which need to be implemented 2022 onwards, right? Then you look at the latest developments in terms of the union budget, कहाँ पे क्या allocation किया है, fiscal deficit के levels क्या हैं. You talk about the ways and means advances also, and of course one thing which I missed out here is talking about fintech, cryptocurrency, central bank digital currency, क्या चल रहा है उसमें, क्या हो रहा है. All of those developments become very, very important. RBI has launched the fintech or the regulatory sandbox as they call it. Multiple cohorts are being coming there. Retail payments हो गया, MSMEs हो गया. So a lot of those things are also coming up. Fintech का एक नया department आ गया है RBI में. So there are so many new developments happening from this perspective, right? So you have to be on toes in terms of reading the news. And अगर कभी भी कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा जो मैंने बोला in terms of the CR aspect of curiosity to recognize, that becomes very, very important. So if you're reading a news item, try to understand it rather than just mugging it up for the sake of it, because अब रट्टा मारोगे तो याद नहीं रहेगा, समझोगे तो याद रहेगा, right? That is very, very important. Now moving on to the next aspect, I again talk about current affairs now. So I moved away from your financial affairs, economic affairs. I'm moving into current affairs now. In the current affairs, what am I looking at? I'm looking at, let's say, people. Now, when I say people, what are the perspectives that I'm looking at? I'm looking at the latest appointments. I'm looking at obituaries. I'm looking at any awards that they've won. Then the next thing that I'm looking at is basically the national news, international news. Then obviously you look at very different perspectives within that. So within national and international, you're also looking at your business news, sports news, a lot of such individual items as well. Then you're looking at what are the latest mergers and acquisitions that have happened, right, in the industry overall. purely from the perspective of the banking and the allied sectors, BFSI, so to speak. Then you talk about what kind of launches have different banks done in the recent past. Then you look at different kinds of partnerships that have emerged as far as different banks and let's say NBFCs are concerned. All those kind of things come into the picture. Then you talk about different kinds of loans, you talk about Exim Bank, you talk about the Asian Development Bank, AIIB, USAID, DFC, so many such global institutions are there, right? You talk about IMF, World Bank, unhone kya kiya latest. So all of those things also become important to understand from the current standpoints. Of course, you look at the various initiatives taken by the government as well. So from that perspective, again, you look at very important aspects, which is your schemes, the government schemes, latest schemes kya nikle hain, usme kya allocations mein changes hua hai, right? Aur kya government ne naya launch kiya hai, all of those things become important. Various kinds of reports that have come, go to try and spend some time to understand those reports. Now, looking at reports and indices, it actually gives you a very good, for example, the Henley Passport Index we talk about, right? So India is basically ranked in the 80s despite being a very strong country. So the reports that you try to read also gives you a lot of information about दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है, क्या हो क्या रहा है दुनिया में, right? And gives you different perspectives of how things can get better from that perspective as well. So it gives you a lot of opinions. And these opinions can definitely come in handy in your descriptive answers as well and in your interviews as well. So when you read reports and indices, it can definitely help you bring a more holistic picture to the entire situation, right? And जो data points आप लेके आओगे उसमें भी definitely आपको फायदा होगा. आप obviously from a GA perspective exam के लिए तो help करेगा ही, but it can also help you for your descriptive answer writing as far as your English is concerned, and it can also help you quoting certain things in the interviews as well, right? So you'll appear as a more well-read person if you go through reports, indices, and the various kinds of schemes that are there. Right. The next angle that you're looking at is obviously sources क्या हैं भाई. So अब हमने जितनी भी चीजों की बात की, so when I talk about marathoners, you can decide to do two things, right? One, either you can stick to, let's say, the PDF wala approach that we basically discussed for both quicks as well as your regulars. But if you're not someone who wants to look at someone else as a source, where are these PDFs being made from? Where is this information coming from, right? So अगर आप खुद ही वो source बनना चाहते हो तो आप कैसे करोगे? So the basic source are your RBI circulars, right? So look at the RBI website, scan it from top to bottom. There's a lot of relevant information. हर दिन आपके rates के बारे में updated information रहती है जो आप track कर सकते हो. CRR कहाँ है, SLR कहाँ है, bank rate, MSS, all of those things can be tracked from the RBI website. RBI में लाइन से आपके नोटिफिकेशंस आते हैं तो आप समझ सकते हो कि क्या नया नोटिफिकेशन निकला, व्हाट इज द लेटेस्ट नोटिफिकेशन दैट हैज कम आउट, व्हाट इज द लेटेस्ट सर्कुलर दैट हैज कम आउट. सो द आरबीआई website itself is a huge repository of very value additive information, especially if you are someone who is looking to make a career in banking. Next thing that you look at is the press information bureau, right? So वहां पे भी आप डेट के हिसाब से segregate कर सकते हो कि कौन सा न्यूज आइटम है. And of course, PI में बहुत सारे news items आते हैं. So how do I choose which news item should I spend time on? So that the driving force there will be based on the previous year's papers that I've looked at, this year's paper that I've looked at, and I based on that figure out whether this particular news item sense बनता है कि नहीं इसको पढ़ने में या इस पे time spend करने में, right? So that is how you look at PIB. That is another fundamental source from where a lot of this information comes in. Then you can pick to choose two important dailies, right? So you can pick up one financial daily. It could be again a business standard, or you talk about Live Mint, or you talk about Economic Times, Hindu Business Line, whichever one you're comfortable, you can pick out one of those. And then you look at a national daily. Again, it could be any one of the newspapers that you're comfortable with, right? So it could again be as simple as Times of India, or as high level as, let's say, a Hindu, or in between like a HT or Indian Express, whatever it is, right? So there has to be one financial daily and one national daily. Now the problem is, जब आप इनके online versions पढ़ने की कोशिश करते हो, the problem is that many times the news item is given to you, but it may not be pertaining to a same day, right? So what I would recommend is look at their e-paper of that particular day, क्योंकि उस e-paper में उस दिन के सारे news items covered होंगे, right? Now whether you want to choose to read it in the e-paper itself or you want to choose to read it from their website, that's a different call that you can take. But अगर आप e-paper पढ़ते हो तो उस दिन के जितने भी news item हैं सारे के सारे news item एक ही जगह पे cover हो जाएंगे. So all the news items pertaining to a particular day will be covered in that e-paper. So you will not miss out any news item. That is the whole idea, right? So let's say, for example, RBI website is giving you all of the information. PIB, you can segregate it date-wise. And as far as your national daily and financial daily is concerned, you look at their e-paper so that you don't miss out any particular news item. And based on all of this news that you've read, you basically try to make your own notes, right? So when you try to make your own notes, either you can write it down or you can basically type it down, whichever way you're feeling comfortable. And you basically refer to it on a regular basis. And again, the same approach, morning and night. right? 2 times a day you'll spend time, and then you again spend time on the weekends towards revision, and then again on a monthly basis you spend time on the revision as well. So these are the holistic things that you would definitely need to look at. Right. Another important aspect here, and this is especially relevant before the exam, is that जिस भी exam को आप दे रहे हो, right? So for example, if you talk about the SBI PO, right? So you talk about whatever are the latest things that have happened, or the news or the announcements that appear on the SBI website, that also becomes very, very important. So any news in and around SBI, you have to ensure that you're basically covered from that perspective in the last 6 to 8 months. So if you're covering that, then nothing is untouched, right? So as I said, from a marathoner's perspective, you can look at it from 2 perspectives. Either आप choose कर सकते हो कि कोई भी एक आप PDF उठा लो and उनके हिसाब से आप follow करना शुरू करो, right? And again, the choice, or let's say the methodology for selecting the PDF remains the same as to what I discussed in the approach that has to be adopted by the regulars as well, right? But अगर आप ये खुद से करना चाहते हो, because obviously उसमें understanding better होगी, but हाँ time भी ज़्यादा लगेगा, but understanding भी better होगी. अगर आप खुद से करना चाहते हो, then this is the approach that I would recommend in terms of what you need to be doing. So this is the strategy overall as far as your marathoners are concerned. Now moving on to address another very, very important question that a lot of you have reached out to us with, right? So how do I decide to choose a teacher for general awareness, right? So again, there are several in the market who are basically doing this, and it again boils down to a methodology that works for you. And whatever works for you, it's not necessary that it will work for somebody else, right? So here again, I'm not going to tell names of individuals, but what I'm going to tell you is the way that you can decide to choose. So the first thing that becomes important here is that understand that अगर आप किसी teacher पे time spend कर रहे हो, the same logic applies that the time is finite, right? Watching a teacher does not mean that आप अपनी खुद की reading बंद कर दोगे, या आपने खुद के notes बनाना या अपना revision आप बंद कर दोगे, right? वो तो आपको करना ही है. You have to revise, you have to read. So as I said, time is finite. So this time again is an additional time that you will have to be spending on a daily basis, or whichever frequency you decide. This is an additional time that you will be spending on watching that person, right? Over and above the time you're spending on reading and revising and so on, right? So it will definitely lead into eating off your time that could have been used for other subjects. That is point number 1, right? Next thing ये है कि if you decide to follow a teacher, right, ensure that you do it till the end, right? 4-5 सेशन करके उसके बाद छोड़ देना, that doesn't make any sense, because वो 4-5 सेशन का टाइम भी वेस्ट हो गया, पूरा टाइम वेस्ट हो गया. So there are obviously many things which in general awareness which do not need an explanation. If you read it, you'll understand it, right? इसमें कुछ rocket science तो है नहीं, right? So obviously अगर कुछ ऐसी चीजें हैं जो आपको बिल्कुल ही clear PDF पढ़ के या फिर daily news पढ़ के समझ में आ रही हैं, तो उसके लिए किसी टीचर को अलग से फॉलो करने की मेरे हिसाब से जरूरत नहीं है. But if you still feel the need to basically look at a particular teacher, on what basis will I decide the teacher? Right? So again, the first thing that I'm looking at is that the delivery style has to be engaging to suit my personality, right? So I may be different from someone else. So जो delivery style मेरे को पसंद है, हो सकता है किसी और को पसंद नहीं हो. So it's important that I like the delivery style, right? And this teacher or the person that you're referring to has the capacity to engage you for the maximum amount of time. That is the first thing that you're looking at, right? Is the delivery style engaging, and is it helping you retain the maximum amount of content based on the style of delivery itself? Now the second thing that becomes important is that what is the information per unit of time, right? So let's say अगर आप 1 घंटे का सेशन देख रहे हो, तो उस 1 घंटे में आप कितना information gather कर पा रहे हो, right? So that becomes very, very important. So my second criteria will be whosoever is able to provide me the maximum information per unit of time, right? So that obviously will be the kind of person that I'm looking at, because that will help me choose a delivery style which suits my need, and it will help me choose someone who's giving me the maximum information per unit of time. So these are the 2 criteria that I will use to figure out which GA teacher suits my needs the best, right? Again, as I said, there is a big caveat here. Time is finite, and whatever time you're giving to that GA teacher, right, is going to come from other subjects, right? So that is the thought process that you should keep in mind, because चाहे आप GA टीचर रखो या ना रखो, इवेंचुअली आपको खुद पढ़ना ही पड़ेगा, आपको खुद रिवाइज करना ही पड़ेगा, क्विजेस आपको देने ही पड़ेंगे, राइट? सो दोस थिंग्स आर नॉट गोइंग टू गो अवे. सो द टाइम इज फाइनाइट. इट्स अ कॉल दैट यू नीड टू टेक, राइट? एंड इफ यू चूजिंग, you choose basis the engaging style that they have, and the style which allows you to retain maximum amount of content. And then the next thing that I'm looking at is the maximum information per unit of time without any waste of time. Those are the 2 primary things that I will choose in terms of figuring out which is the best person who can be helping me in this GA preparation. Right. Now, addressing the elephant in the room, wherein you guys also asked us as to why Merit Shine is basically not giving us those GA sessions that we were giving you earlier, right? So here, the couple of things that we realized. So the first thing was, so while the initial response and the excitement to these sessions was quite high, right, and there was definitely a lot of following, a lot of students were actually watching these sessions, but we realized that as time progressed, right, and the students realized, or the aspirants realized, that there was a crunch of time that they had to give to the other subjects as well, and obviously realized that there is a lot of time that needs to be spent overall on improving other subjects and not just general banking and financial awareness. We realized that the response that we wanted for those sessions on a consistent basis, that actually wasn't really satisfactory, because we were putting huge amount of effort in creating that content in terms of delivering those sessions, and obviously the bandwidth that went into those sessions was humongous, right? But we felt that the kind of response that we were getting towards those sessions wasn't as good as what we were expecting. So as a result, we felt that it was not really worth doing it, right? Now, second thing is that also many students were preferring to read the PDFs, right, or the content of those sessions rather than actually watching those videos, because the videos were explaining a lot of things, but the students felt that PDFs are good enough, right? So we also felt that, okay, if PDFs are good enough, and if you're going to be spending so much amount of our bandwidth in creating those sessions, what is the value add that we are providing to the students from that perspective? Right, so we obviously spent a lot of time in creating those sessions, creating those PDFs, but we realized that obviously students were spending more times on the PDFs. And here again, the students were obviously following multiple PDFs. It wasn't that we were the only primary source. There were multiple sources that were being referred to from a PDF's perspective also. So we thought that we could channelize those efforts in areas that can actually benefit the students better than what we were doing at this point of time. So हमने सोचा कि वो चीजें करते हैं जहां पे students का response ज्यादा है, जहां पे हमको value addition दिख रहा है, right? So for example, we talk about the monthly revision sessions that we did on YouTube. We saw that there was definitely a good response to those sessions. So we can definitely look at those kind of sessions which we did, let's say for the month of October, November, December on YouTube, wherein we found that the response was pretty decent, right? And those sessions were quite helpful for the students as well. And this is something which we can definitely look to do in the current year as well. When we get closer to the exam, we'll do those monthly revision sessions. Of course, a disclaimer here is that if the response is good and we find that there are more takers for such sessions, we will definitely do those sessions as well. And again, there are some news items which obviously require you to be explaining things, right? So which is where the awareness aspect comes into the picture. So what we've also thought of doing is that helping you guys in terms of understanding a lot of those jargons and terms, and we've been doing that in the last year as well through Fin Fun Day, wherein we brought in a lot of jargon and terms that are difficult to understand. We did a lot of sessions, and we'll continue doing those sessions in this season as well, wherein we explain tough terms to you so that you understand what those terms are, and you are able to correlate those terms with the news items that are appearing, right? So that is something which we'll again try and do this year. And again, the disclaimer here as well is that the response overall has to be good. If the response is good, then definitely we'll look at doing more of those sessions as well. So wherever we feel that we can add value, and wherever we feel that the response levels from the students is good, we will continue doing those sessions for you, because we feel that that is where we are adding the most value to you guys, right? And that is something which we will continue to do. So we are always here. We are always here to support and help our students, and that is something which we will definitely continue doing. But the biggest point that I want to highlight is that what we did so far was a huge amount of effort, but the kind of response that we were getting from the students wasn't really as good as what we were expecting. And as a result, we thought that we should cut down on some of the things that we were doing and do things which can add more value to the students, right? So as I said, depending on the response levels, we'll look at these monthly revision sessions just prior to the exam. And we'll also look at these awareness sessions wherein we can add value to you to understand things, understand jargon, so that it helps you understand the news in a better manner. So these are certain things that we will definitely look at doing, right? So in a nutshell, when I look at this particular session, what exactly have we covered? We've essentially talked about different strategies that you can adopt to win. Either you're a quick, either you are a marathoner, or you are a regular, right? Fit into the category that works best for you, but most importantly, enjoy being in that category. See, there is nothing to be ashamed of here, right? If you belong to the quicks category or if you belong to the marathoners category, इसमें कुछ शर्म वाली बात ही नहीं है, because each person is different, each person's priorities are different. You have your own priorities, you stick to those priorities, right? It doesn't matter if someone else is a marathoner and you're a quick, doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, the exam has multiple subjects, right? And you can choose to have your strengths, whatever you feel are the best things that work for you, right? That is the whole idea, right? Of course, you have to improve all the subjects to a reasonably good level, because हो सकता है किसी दिन जो आपका strength है वो इतना tough आ जाए कि आपको अपने weaknesses पे भी focus करना पड़े, which is why we say that from an exam perspective, it's important that you put reasonable amount of time on each of these subjects, right? So to ensure that in case the area which you consider as your strength, the paper comes out to be so tough that you can't differentiate yourself, then you have to look at the other subjects as well. So from that perspective, it becomes important to give equal weightage to each of the subjects and focus on that. But individually, it's up to you whether you're a quick or a regular or a marathoner. Entirely your call. Nobody else decides that for you but you yourself. And I've given you very clear criteria as to how you can choose your sources wisely and ensure that you stick to those sources. But the most important thing, as I kept on telling throughout the session, is that whatever preparation style you adopt, you have to enjoy it. You have to let go of that fear factor, right? Enjoy karo pure process ko, and process ke saath pura consistently stick karo, and you will definitely get the results. That's the most important aspect. And as I keep telling you guys, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible for those who keep trying, right? So pick your category, stick to the strategy that is being told in that category, choose your things wisely and follow it to the T. And while following it, enjoy the process. Trust me, the results will be in your favor. So on that note, this is Ravi signing off. Have a great day and a wonderful, wonderful weekend ahead. And I'll see you soon in another session. But until then, this is Ravi signing off. See you guys.